everyone, it's Sevi. The 4.0 version and Fontaine region have finally dropped, and for our first character trick, we have Lyney here ready to make your primos magically disappear. In this video, we'll discuss all about Lyney's kit and talents, constellations, best artifacts and weapons, and team synergies to help you master the art of prestidigitation. Let the show begin!
This is no mere illusion, 'tis I, Lyney, the greatest magician in all Tevat.
Lyney is a 5-star Pyro Bow character whose kit revolves around firing charged shots, gaining prop surplus stacks, and exploding his fearsome cat-in-the-hat assistant. He's also a character who's more powerful against Pyro-affected enemies and when teamed with Pyro teammates, earning him a strong spot in Pyro-focused teams. Let's take a look at how his kit works. Lyney's core gameplay is mainly composed of charged shots, quite similar to Tignari and Ganyu's gameplay. His level 2 shot fires off a prop arrow, which deals pyro damage with 2 important effects. First, it summons a Grinmalkin hat upon hit that taunts nearby enemy attacks to distract them from Lyney. When the hat is destroyed or expires, it deals pyro damage to a nearby target enemy. So every time you fire a prop arrow, the current hat gets destroyed and deals damage, with another hat taking its place to repeat the cycle. Second, if Lyney has more than 60% HP, he will consume 20% HP to create a prop surplus stack. He can gain up to 5 stacks to power up his skill. Of course, you will need a healer to consistently keep his HP high and reactivate the stacking mechanic. Thankfully, these stacks still exist up to 30 seconds even if Lyney is switched out, so you can sneak in something between his charged attacks if needed without the fear of losing stacks. With Fontaine's new Pneuma Osea mechanic, Lyney is a Pneuma-aligned unit. His prop arrow's hit causes a Spirit Breath Thorn to descend for additional pyro damage and inflict special effects on Pneuma-weak enemies, and this can be triggered every 6 seconds. Then, Lyney's skill consumes all prop surplus stacks, deals AoE pyro damage, and generates 5 particles on hit. Consuming stacks causes the base damage to increase, as well as heal him for a certain percent of his max HP. If there is a Grinmalkin hat on the field, this skill causes it to immediately explode as well. This will be typically used last in Lyney's attack combo after accumulating a lot of prop stacks for maximum skill damage. Then, as for Lyney's burst, he transforms into a Grinmalkin cat that dashes around and deals 1 instance of pyro damage on nearby enemies. When the duration ends, he will ignite fireworks to deal huge pyro damage, summon a Grinmalkin hat, and gain 1 prop surplus stack. You can end the duration early once you've already hit your target enemies by simply pressing the skill button. Finally, let's take a quick look at Lyney's passive talents. For his Ascension 1 passive, if you consume his HP with a prop arrow and hit an enemy with a summoned hat, this will restore 3 energy and increase the base damage. It's a nice bonus as a way to generate energy outside his skill particles and to boost his damage. For his Ascension 4 passive, Lyney gains extra damage bonus when hitting enemies affected by pyro. It starts with a base 60% extra damage, which is a pretty huge bonus. Then for every other pyro unit in your team, that adds another 20% damage bonus. This can max out at a whopping 100% damage bonus. In order to consistently maintain this bonus, he will need equally consistent pyro application. And to get the maximum bonus, you just need 2 other pyro units. With these conditions, it already strongly indicates that his best team template will be a Mono Pyro team, as we'll discuss more later. And lastly, Lyney's exploration passive marks unique resources in Fontaine on your minimap, which is definitely helpful as we explore and farm resources in the unfamiliar Fontaine region. Combining all of his abilities, Lyney's standard on-field combo is the following. Start by firing 3 to 4 charged shots. While dealing damage, he'll also keep exploding the hat and generating prop stacks as long as you maintain a high enough HP. 3 charged shots are generally more recommended for optimal buff uptime and rotation time, but 4 charged shots is also fine and not a huge difference. Then use his burst to deal damage and to generate an additional stack and Grinmalkin hat. Cancel it ASAP when you've hit all the desired enemies. If your burst is not ready, you can simply skip this step and just do another charged attack, then just burst in the next rotation. By this point, you'll have 4 or 5 surplus stacks. Finish his on-field combo by using his skill to consume all prop stacks, deal damage with his skill and any existing hat's explosion, and replenish HP. While other combos may be feasible depending on his equipped gear, this combo will be your bread and butter for most situations. Adjust accordingly if there are other conditions. For his talent priority, focus on his normal attack level since his charged shots compose about 60 to 70% of his damage output, followed by equally leveling his skill and burst. Lyney already impresses at C0, but let's quickly go through what his Constellations add, which is pretty much just more damage. C1 lets him have up to 2 Grin Malkin hats active. Additionally, prop arrows now summon 2 hats and give him 2 prop surplus stacks by default. This results in more damage dealt and easier stacking. C2 increases his crit damage by 20% every 2 seconds on the field, maxing up to 3 stacks. Thanks to his crit rate ascension bonus and likely using the 4-piece Hunter set, this crit damage bonus will be effectively utilized. C3 increases his normal and charged attack level by 3, which is a first for Constellations, but it makes sense since his charge attacks comprise a huge portion of his damage. C4 decreases the pyro resistance of enemies hit with his pyro arrow, also a damage bump that also gains a lot of value in Mono Pyro teams. C5 increases his burst level by 3, and C6 causes his charge attack to fire off an extra hit that will deal additional pyro damage, yet another damage boosting constellation. Now you might also be wondering which is a better pull between his early Constellations or signature bow if you really want to invest in him. On that note, his signature bow provides a similar damage increase from a free-to-play option compared to his second Constellation. Since his bow shares a banner with the Aqua Simulacra, his next best 5-star weapon, I would recommend trying to go for the weapon banner in this case if you're considering either Constellations or a weapon. Not to mention, weapons are transferable. Now let's see how to best build his artifact stats and sets. Lyney's main stats are basically an attack sands, pyro damage goblet, and crit circlet. His circlet will most likely be crit damage since he already gains crit rate from his ascension bonus and if you're using the 4-piece Hunter set. As for the goblet, attack percent is a pretty good alternative. Since Lyney gains so much damage bonus from his passive, the diminishing returns from attack isn't as bad, and the gap will generally be about 5% less than a pyro damage bonus goblet. And for substats, you really just want to get as much crit and attack percent as possible. Lyney won't need Elemental Mastery as his best recommended team is a Mono Pyro team which is not reaction based. As for his ER target, it's very lax since Lyney's rotations can just let him burst every other rotation rather than trying hard to build enough ER to burst every rotation. So you can just take whatever ER you get and prioritize attack and crit for offense. But on a Mono Pyro team, since there are a lot of pyro particles going around, and if you equip your 4th flex slot with a Favonius weapon, you can just aim for around 120% and it can generally be enough to burst every rotation should you wish to. Either way, it's not a huge concern, and you could always adapt your rotation to just do an extra charged shot rather than burst if it's not yet ready, so don't worry about it too much. For his artifact sets, his best in slot is none other than the Marechaussee Hunter, which boosts his charged attack, but more importantly gives a huge stackable crit rate bonus. This set is so good on him that it creates a huge gap versus his other next still viable sets, which are the Lava Walker, Vermilion Hereafter, Retracing Bolide, and Shimenawa's Reminiscence. These have their own particular conditions for maximum effectiveness. A mix of 2-piece pyro damage, attack, or hunter sets are also very competitive against them depending on substat quality. Now, how big is the 4-piece Hunter's gap versus these other viable combos? Assuming equal substats versus the alternatives, the 4-piece Hunter has a huge 12 to 15% gap. So if you really want the highest damage potential on him, this is pretty much the final build you want. Of course, if you can somehow get godly quality pieces on the other combos, then the gap will be smaller. It will also take a long time before we can farm great full sets on the new domain, so for now, stick with the alternatives. I would also not recommend using Wanderer's Troop. While it does have a 35% charged attack bonus, and his charged shots compose about 60 to 70% of his total damage output, the other set options have better and or more useful bonuses, resulting in generally better damage output, especially since the EM stat is also wasted on him in a Mono Pyro team. Now let's take a look at his best weapons. For his free-to-play choices, all of these craftable bows, including the new Song of Stillness, are already great viable options for Lyney. The R5 Prototype Crescent is situationally his best in slot 4-star, but it's important to note that its potential depends on hitting a weak point, which also depends on the player's skill and enemy type. If that's a concern for you, then it may be better to go with less conditional options, like the Song of Stillness, which is his next best free-to-play option with a convenient passive. If you already have a Blackcliff Warbow, it's also a pretty good free-to-play option for the crit damage and stackable attack bonus. However, its potential is only maximized in situations where you can stack the bonus, which is useless against single-target bosses. I also wouldn't recommend using your Star Glitter to buy it just for Lyney, as we have great free alternatives already. If you're a BP spender, the brand new Zion of the Blazing Sun is a good choice. However, it's only marginally ahead of the craftable R5 Song. Note as well that the passive is purely single target, and you might overcap on crit rate depending on Lyney's gear. You can get the Zion if you don't plan on crafting the bows and just want a straightforward choice. If you also claimed the Viridescent Hunt before, it's generally at a similar or slightly lower level as the Zion, though the Vortex can be situationally useful to crowd control small mobs. However, you also have to be careful of overcapping crit rate, and this is easily replaceable or overtaken by free-to-play and 5-star bows. For the 5-star choices, the first great magic is his signature and overall best-in-slot weapon. With a Mono Pyro team, you'll get especially huge value from its stacking attack bonus. Otherwise, the Aqua Simulacra, Thundering Pulse, and Skyward Harp are very good 5-star upgrades over your free-to-play and BP choices, with Aqua Simulacra being second after his signature, which is very fortunate since they currently share the same banner. The Amos Bow is also usable, however, there's very little difference to his 4-star options, so you can use it if you don't want to use crafting billets and have no better option. Finally, let's go through Lyney's team comps. Lyney will act as your on-field DPS while his teammates will be providing off-field support and damage, and making sure Lyney is well protected while in his aiming mode. Thankfully, his best template is very straightforward to play and accessible to build. Since we're looking to maximize his damage bonus passive with Pyro teammates, Lyney's best comp is a Mono Pyro team, which typically consists of 3 Pyro units and a 4th flex slot. Like all best Mono Pyro teams, this will see him comped with Bennett and Xiangling. Bennett provides sustained healing and a huge attack buff to boost team damage and survivability, especially while Lyney's on field, while Xiangling deals lots of AoE Pyro damage in application and provides Pyro-relevant buffs with Constellations. Xiangling is already free from Spiral Abyss, but Bennett will also be obtainable in the 4.0 main event, and is running on Lyney's banner. It's nice we can easily access his 2 top teammates. As for the 4th slot, choose a flex character that complements the Mono Pyro synergy. Anemo is a top choice for shredding Pyro resistance with a VV set, and among Anemos, Kazuha will be the most highly recommended option for his strong crowd controlling and providing a Pyro damage boost to the entire team. If you want the sibling duo here, Lynette can assume the Anemo flex slot too and provide another taunting source to help protect Lyney. But again, Anemo units just work in general and will have their own pros and cons. However, if you're up against enemies that can stagger you easily, this could be a very risky option if you can't dodge or set up your shots properly, and getting interrupted will significantly affect Lyney's damage output. Thus, having access to shields makes for a much more comfortable experience that could be more valuable than having a higher damage ceiling. Jiu is a neutral option that won't disrupt the team's Pyro application, and Zhongli is an especially very comfy pick whose shield shreds enemy resistance and reliably protects you against interruptions. Other shielders can generally work too, as long as their elemental application isn't too strong to disrupt Pyro application. Layla, Tank Faye, Xinyan, Kirara, Diona, and the like are good shielder picks. Dia could also work since her super armor also provides the same interruption resistance as a shield. Another variant of the Mono Pyro template could be Lyney and Bennett as the main Pyro members, comped with 2 Anemo units who can infuse their Anemo abilities with Pyro, 2 Geo units to provide combined defensive utility, or 1 Anemo and 1 Geo. You can also make a burning team by using a Dendro unit in the 4th flex slot to maintain burning aura, which is essentially like a Mono Pyro team concept. However, this results in a generally lower damage ceiling compared to using a good Anemo option. If you're thinking about slotting Lyney in a Vape or Melt team like other Pyro DPSs usually would, there are some huge considerations with this playstyle. First of all, it won't utilize his passive or signature weapon effectively, which requires an enemy to be affected by Pyro to get the damage bonuses, resulting in a huge loss for his damage. Second, his charge attack playstyle doesn't let him synergize with Xingqiu or Yelan, who are essential units of a reverse vaporized team. Third, in order to consistently vaporize or melt, you would need off-field hydro or cryo applicators that periodically apply their element. Even then, controlling which element is the trigger will be a challenge with his charge shot playstyle. So while there may be teams that could enable this, the setup could just end up being more complicated or difficult, whereas a Mono Pyro team is easy to play, very accessible, and generally his strongest team, so I'd recommend sticking to it. Of course, there may be other units on the way that could expand Lyney's team potential, both in Mono Pyro and hopefully in other reaction teams. With all that, let's quickly summarize Lyney's major pros and cons. For his pros, Lyney is a very strong unit in the Mono Pyro template with a very streamlined playstyle. His Mono Pyro comp is also quite accessible with free core units, and it's easier to play due to having no complex reaction mechanics. He also has very good free-to-play weapon choices with the best 5-star weapon banner possible right now. I mean, look at those crit damage bows. As for his cons, his gameplay is not for those who dislike having to manually aim, and I'm looking at you mobile players especially. He is a very squishy unit, and and loses a lot of damage when he gets interrupted, so you'd need a good defensive support or just have amazing reflexes to properly dodge. His charge attack gameplay does give him some limits on team synergies, and if you already have good, well-built Pyro DPSs, he ends up mostly being a redundant unit in terms of filling in your team roster. With all that, I think he's ultimately a strong and solid introduction to Fontaine with a simple yet focused gameplay design, and he offers a sneak peek into possible new HP and elemental mechanics that will continue to develop, so watch out. I'd wager he still has a trick or two up his sleeve. After all, the Fontaine show is just getting started. And that's going to be all for this Lyney guide. Let me know in the comments what you think of Lyney, whether you pulled him or just tried him out in the character trial. I would be interested to know. If this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care.
Doing all this for me? Are you trying to steal this magician's heart by any chance?